Alright, so how did a dead king and his son help create one of the largest colonies in America? Find out now. Thanks for joining Learning with Sprayberry, where we make social studies fun, easy, and educational. Today we're going to dive into the creation of the Carolina colony, and more importantly, my home state of North Carolina. So in 1649, the King of England, King Charles I, was kicked off the throne. Well, his head was taken off, so he was pretty much removed from the throne anyway, but whatever, that's beside the point. Now, once he was executed, his sons fled to France for safety. This whole ordeal starts through a big problem between him and his nobles. They didn't like the way he was governing, they executed him, and in stepped Oliver Cromwell to take the lead. Let's fast forward a few years. King Charles II pops back onto the throne. How? Well, 8 nobles in his court decided that he was a better leader than Oliver Cromwell, and they helped put him back into power. Now, if somebody helps you get your kingdom back, what do you got to do? You've got to say thank you. And that's exactly what he did. He gave these 8 men something that nobody else had gotten so far. A huge, giant colony. In return for their help, he grants them a huge colonial charter that's in the New World. This colonial charter spans from the southern border of Virginia all the way down to, estimates say, around the bottom part of Georgia, maybe northern Florida. And it touches from Atlantic to Pacific Ocean all the way across. It's a huge colony. Now, to make this work, these guys get together and they create an organization. They call themselves the Lords Proprietor. And funnily enough, and lucky for them, the king pretty much gives them the control to do whatever they want in this new colony. So they set themselves up as the leaders and rulers of this colony. So they've got a big, huge colony. Whoop-de-doo. So they've got a big, huge colony and they've got to make money. Well, how do they do that? First, you gotta start your colony. You've got to set people up there. These people have got to start earning you money. Well, they try to do that a couple of times. Now, North Carolina is no stranger to colonization. Think about Roanoke. They tried to set up a colony. It didn't last. Everybody disappeared. This time, they knew it would be different. Except, it wasn't. The first attempt to set up a colony in Carolina is known as Charlestown. However, this one doesn't really go any differently than Roanoke did. The first one is met with problems from natives, problems from planning, and a lack of supplies, and it ultimately fails as well. The second time is a little bit more successful when Lord Anthony Ashley Cooper moves the site a little bit further north and collects more settlers that are able to grow there. These settlers paid rent on the land, and they were happy to pay rent on the land because England, it's fallen apart. You've got the bubonic plague spreading, wiping out a huge chunk of the population. You've got the giant London fire, which wipes out a major city. So these guys are happy to get away from all the problems that are set up and going on in England. Now, after leaving England, the ships take a quick pit stop by Barbados, and they collect a lot of English settlers who are there who know how to establish plantations. Because Carolina colony is good for growing, and the Lords Proprietors want to make money. They're charging rent at the moment. And these people got to make money if they're going to pay their rent. So they pick up people from Barbados who are used to running plantations and using slaves as a producer of cash crops. Now keep in mind, for those of you that don't remember, cash crops are crops grown where their primary service is to make money. This doesn't necessarily mean it's edible, although you can have an edible cash crop. Rice. A lot of the cash crops grown in Carolina weren't necessary for human survival. Tobacco, indigo, cotton, these are things you don't have to survive. You don't have to have tobacco to survive. You don't have to have nice blue shirts of indigo to survive. And you don't have to have cotton clothing to stay warm. Wool and leather, they'd been around forever and they worked just fine. So after the first year, Charlestown had survived. Unfortunately, it was filled with disease, attacks with natives, and this prompted another move to a third and final site. This site was laid out and better prepared for the expanding colonization that they hoped to take place here. They started building the city out in a grid, which means if you need more room, you just add another row. It makes it a lot easier to build a city when it's all nice and square. Charlestown served as the capital of the colony for many, many years, and they used a method called the headright method to help bring colonists over. What it said was the more people you brought with you, the more land you got. Meaning, if you brought you and your family and your slaves and your indentured servants, you got an extra chunk of land for each one of them that you brought over. This is an amazing way to get land for the cheap. Cheaper, all you had to do was pay to get them there. So let's talk about the economy of the Carolina colony. The economy was based primarily off agriculture and paying rent to the lord's proprietors. They also traded with natives, getting fur and deer skin, which they could then send back to England to be made into goods. Slaves that were brought from Barbados and Africa were used to raise cattle, and that cattle was then traded for sugar from South America and other locations. This created a booming processing of sugarcane. Rice was imported from Africa and grown in the what's going to become South Carolina area. With the wet marshes, it made rice perfect for growing there. And slaves from Africa had often spent time growing rice in other plantations, so they know exactly what to do with it. Now, tobacco is a major cash crop in the northern part of the Carolina colony. This tobacco was brought in by John Rolfe. Remember John Rolfe? Jamestown. He brought this in, and it becomes a huge cash crop because England is crazy about tobacco. Carolina also helped provide a lot of shipbuilding materials. We normally think of the northern and middle colonies as the shipbuilders, and that's true, but the Carolina colony provided the things that are even more important than building the boat. The stuff to waterproof the boat. A boat's no good if it leaks water. The trees in our area produce wonderful sap and led us to be able to create tar and other items that we can then use to seal the ship so that it's watertight. Again, you can build a boat, but if it don't float, it ain't a boat. Now we're going to get into the less popular part of the Carolina colony. So remember how I said that Carolina traded with Native Americans in order to get fur and deer skin to sell to England? Eventually, the natives get kind of tired of providing all the stuff for the Carolina colony. Not wanting to miss out on a chance to make money, colonists started kidnapping the Native Americans and selling them into slavery in the Caribbean. As you can imagine, this kind of ruined the relationship between natives and the colonists. How do we go from Carolina colony, from Virginia to Florida and across the country, to North and South Carolina? Well, as the colony grows, it starts to experience problems. Just like when you grow up, you get growing pains, so did the colonies. It came down to the fact that one governor couldn't handle all the problems that were being created by such a large colony. A system of government was created in which the regular colonists finally could have more of a say. They developed the majority rule system, which means to make any legislative changes, you had to have a majority of the three parts that created the assembly. The three parts were nobles selected by the lords proprietors, the people that those nobles selected, and then the average freeman. Now with the majority rule, if two groups came to a majority on a law, it didn't matter because this third group didn't want to pass it, which gave the freemen more of a voice in things. And you would imagine that that would solve a lot of the governmental problems, but it doesn't. By 1729, the problems had yet to subside. Things in Carolina were still getting worse. Arguments over religion, taxation, and other governmental elements meant that the colony was losing its profitability. And remember, the lords proprietor liked this because it made them rich. Part of the issue was due to the fact that the north and south parts of the colony were getting extremely different. In northern Carolina, we started to grow tobacco, but we didn't use Charlestown as our port of access. We instead used Virginia because it's closer to the northern part of the colony. And in the south, they grew cotton and indigo, two totally different crops. In 1689, the colony had essentially split. The lords proprietor had quit using the headright method in favor of just charging rent, meaning more money for them. But this headright method meant that a lot of people couldn't afford to come over to the colonies and get land. This continued problems led the king to eventually step in. What he had to do is buy the colonies back from the lord proprietors. Carolina was split into two colonies officially when in 1712 the king appointed a governor for North Carolina independent of the governor in South Carolina. Or it became independent in 1729 when the colonies were purchased and became royal colonies. Historians have a hard time agreeing on which one it was that led to the colonies splitting. History's fun, ain't it? What do you think about Carolina? Was the king too generous in his doling out of rewards? Did he set the colony up for failure by giving too much land to a group of people who hadn't run land before? Or were the Lords Proprietor just lacking basic understanding of how to govern a colony? Let me know down in the comments below. Well, if you like what you saw, hit the like button. If you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button. Make sure to smash the bell so that you get notified when new videos drop. Thanks for watching.